It's time for Fresh Oil with singer-songwriter and pastor Keith Manley, a program designed to minister the gospel of God's grace and to bring fresh oil to the brokenhearted. And now, with today's program, Pastor Keith Manley.
Welcome to Fresh Oil. I'm so glad you joined me for the program. This week we've walked through Anchored, Faith for an Anxious Age. And what a week it's been. We started by naming anxiety honestly, what it actually is, where it comes from, and why feeling it doesn't make you a bad Christian. Then we sat with David and learned how to pray without polish, just raw honesty laid out before God. Then we watched Jesus sleep through a storm and learned that peace isn't the absence of trouble, it's a presence in the middle of it. And yesterday we walked through the names of God: Jehovah Jireh, Jehovah Rapha, Jehovah Shalom, Jehovah Shammah, El Roy. Names given to real, frightened people in real crisis moments. Today I want to bring all of that down to the ground. I want to talk about something very practical. How do you actually build a life day by day that stays anchored? Not just during the big crisis, but in the ordinary grind of an anxious week. Because here's something I've learned in over 4 decades of pastoring people. Most anxiety isn't one massive storm. Most anxiety is low-grade, constant background noise. It's the steady hum of worry that runs under your day while you're making breakfast, sitting in traffic, scrolling your phone, lying in bed. And the truth is, you can't fight a constant low-grade enemy with an occasional, once-in-a-while response. If anxiety is daily, your anchoring has to be daily too. You wouldn't expect to eat one good meal a month and stay healthy. Spiritual and emotional steadiness work the same way. It's not the big dramatic moments of faith that carry most of us through. It's the small, repeated, unglamorous habits we build into the rhythm of an ordinary Tuesday. So today I want to walk you through several daily anchoring disciplines. These aren't complicated. None of them require an hour of your day or a seminary degree. But I've watched these practices over and over in the lives of people I've pastored become the difference between someone who's constantly capsizing and someone who can take a real hit and still stay upright. The first discipline is what I'd call the morning anchor. Before you pick up your phone, before the headlines, before the text, before the to-do list starts spinning in your head, I want to encourage you to give God the very first few minutes of your day. Not a whole hour if you don't have it, even 5 minutes. Psalm 5 says, "My voice you shall hear in the morning, O Lord. In the morning I will direct it to you, and I will look up." There's something powerful about that phrase, "I will look up." Before your eyes go down to a screen, before your mind goes out to your problems, look up first. Even something as simple as saying out loud, "Lord, before anything else happens today, I'm choosing to start with you." That's a small act, but it sets the trajectory for everything that follows. I found that the believers who feel the steadiest aren't the ones who never get hit with anxious thoughts during the day. They're the ones who've already established in those first few minutes who's actually in charge of the day before the day has a chance to convince them otherwise. The second discipline is what I'd call naming it before it grows. We talked about this earlier in the week with David's Psalms. The power of putting words to what you're feeling instead of letting it stay vague and swirling. I want to give you something practical here. When you feel that anxious tightness rise up in your chest, your stomach, wherever you carry it, stop, even for 30 seconds, and name exactly what you're afraid of. Not, I just feel anxious. Get specific. I'm afraid the conversation with my husband tonight is going to go badly. I'm afraid I'm not going to have enough money to cover this bill. Vague anxiety is much harder to bring to God than named anxiety. It's like trying to pray against a fog. But once you've named the actual fear, you can do exactly what Paul told us in Philippians 4. Bring that specific thing to God in prayer with thanksgiving, and let His peace stand guard over that particular gate. I tell people all the time, anxiety left unnamed tends to multiply. It picks up speed in the dark, but the moment you drag it into the light and say its actual name, it almost always loses some of its power. The third discipline is building a remembrance practice. This is something I picked up from watching how God instructed His people throughout the Old Testament. Again and again, God told Israel to build memorials, stones stacked up, feast established, names given to places, specifically so they would remember what He had done. When Israel crossed the Jordan River into the Promised Land, God told them to take 12 stones from the middle of the riverbed and stack them up on the shore, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, "What do these stones mean to you?" God knew something about human nature. We forget. We forget fast. We forget exactly when we need the memory the most. So I want to encourage you to build your own version of those stones. Keep a small list somewhere, your phone notes, a journal, whatever works for you, of specific times God came through for you. Not vague, God is good generalities, specific. March of 2019, the medical bill that I thought would bankrupt us got covered in a way I never saw coming. The year my son was wandering and I thought he'd never come back, and he did. When anxiety hits, you don't have to manufacture faith out of nothing. You go back to your stones. You remind yourself, this is the same God who did that. He hasn't changed. The fourth discipline is guarding what you feed your mind, especially right before bed. I want to be gentle here because I'm not trying to add guilt to your life, but I've watched this pattern over and over in people I've counseled. We scroll the news right before bed, or we replay a hard conversation in our heads, or we let our minds wander into every what-if scenario about tomorrow, and then we wonder why we can't sleep, why our hearts are racing at midnight. Philippians 4:8 gives us something so practical here, right on the heels of that passage about anxiety we looked at on day 1. Paul writes, "Whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things." That word meditate there means to turn something over in your mind repeatedly, to dwell on it, to chew on it like a cow chewing its cud. Paul is essentially saying, you get to choose what you let your mind chew on repeatedly. So before bed, instead of scrolling, try reading one psalm. Instead of replaying the hard conversation for the 10th time, try writing down one thing you're grateful for from that day. It sounds small. It is small. But small, repeated choices about what you feed your mind add up to an entirely different emotional landscape over weeks and months. The fifth discipline, and I think this one might be the most overlooked in church culture, is bringing your anxiety into community instead of carrying it alone. So much of what fuels anxiety is isolation. The sense that you're the only one dealing with this. That if people really knew what was going on inside you, they'd think less of you. Galatians 6:2 says, "Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ." That verse assumes you're going to actually tell someone what your burden is. I've watched people carry crushing anxiety for years, silently, inside a church full of people who would have gladly prayed with them, sat with them, helped carry the weight, if only they'd known. There is real, measurable, spiritual, and emotional power in saying out loud to a trusted friend, a small group, a prayer partner, "I'm struggling with anxiety right now, and I need you to pray with me, not just for me." That single act of vulnerability does something that private prayer alone sometimes can't do. It reminds you, in a very tangible, human way, that you are not carrying this by yourself. The sixth discipline is what I'd call practicing physical stillness alongside spiritual stillness. Now, I'm a pastor, not a doctor, so I want to be careful here and say plainly, if your anxiety is severe, please don't hesitate to also seek out a good Christian counselor or physician. God uses both. But I do want to say this, our bodies and our souls are deeply connected, more than we often acknowledge in church. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." That stillness isn't just a spiritual posture, it's often a physical one too. Sitting quietly, breathing slowly, putting your phone in another room for even 10 minutes. These aren't secular self-help tricks foreign to our faith. They're actually consistent with the biblical pattern of stillness before God. Elijah, after running from Jezebel in complete exhaustion and despair, didn't get a lecture from God. God let him sleep, fed him, let him rest, and only then spoke to him in that still, small voice on the mountain. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do for your anxious heart is simply slow your body down enough to actually hear what God's been trying to say all along. The seventh and final discipline I want to leave you with is choosing trust as a daily decision, not a one-time feeling. This is so important because I think a lot of us are waiting to feel trusting before we act trusting, and that's backwards. Trust biblically is often less of a feeling and more of a decision you make, sometimes minute by minute. Remember David's words from Psalm 56 that we kept coming back to all week? "Whenever I am afraid, I will trust in you." That's not David saying, "I never feel afraid." That's David saying, fear is going to show up, probably today, probably more than once. And every single time it does, I am going to make the decision again to trust. Some days that decision will feel easy. Other days it will feel like the hardest thing you do all day. But every time you make it, you're building a kind of spiritual muscle memory so that trust becomes less of a one-time leap and more of a well-worn path your heart already knows how to walk. Practicing real stillness, body and soul together, and choosing trust again and again every single time fear shows back up. My prayer is that these programs have given you some peace this week, to know that no matter what you face, God is there.
Thanks for joining us today for Fresh Oil with Pastor Keith Manley. Fresh Oil is an outreach of Grace Family Church in Rockford, Illinois, and can be heard each weekday at this same time. You can reach us online at weneedgod.com. Until next time, remember, God's love for you is unconditional. that He makes His mercies new every morning.